Chapter 32. She's More Than a Desire. The cabin of the return flight to Zurich was silent, save for the rhythmic, low-frequency hum of the Gulfstream's engines cutting through the night. I sat in the dark, my face illuminated only by the pale blue light of a tablet showing the latest news cycle. Aristhorne arrested, the architect of the Sterling fraud exposed. Alexander Blackwood redeemed, a legacy of truth. Maya Sterling, the new titan of neurotech. I should have felt a surge of triumph. My name was being cleared. My father, Arthur, was no longer a common thief in the history books, but a man who had been betrayed by his closest friend. The empire I had spent my life building was safe in the hands of the woman I loved. But as the plane banked over the snowy peaks of the Alps, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a man who had just survived a shipwreck and was looking at the shore for the first time. For years, I had viewed the world through the lens of acquisition. Everything was a target, a variable, or a liability. Even Maya, especially Maya, had started as a desire I wanted to possess. I had wanted to lock her in, to secure her brilliance, to own the fire that made me feel alive. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cool glass of the window. How small that felt now. How primitive. She was no longer a desire. She was the oxygen. She was the only thing that made the billions of dollars and the glass towers look like what they truly were, hollow monuments to a lonely man's fear. I realized then that I didn't want to own the room anymore. I wanted to be the man she chose to let into her room. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Blackwood, we are 20 minutes from landing. The weather in Zurich is clear and cold." "Thank you, Captain," I murmured. I stood up and walked to the small mirror in the lavatory. I looked at the man staring back. The charcoal suit was gone, replaced by a simple black sweater. The CEO mask was cracked beyond repair. I looked tired. I looked human. I looked like a man who was ready to be second best for the rest of his life. And for Alexander Blackwood, that was the greatest promotion I'd ever received. Maya POV. The Hirslanden clinic felt different tonight. The nurses moved with a lighter step. The air seemed less like medicine and more like spring, despite the snow on the ground outside. I stood by my father's bed, watching him sleep. His breathing was deep and regular. For the first time in 3 years, the ventilator had been turned down to its lowest setting. He was breathing on his own. "He's doing it, Maya," a voice said from the doorway. I turned. Leo Mercer was standing there. He looked different than he had in the hotel suite. The arrogance of the golden boy had been replaced by a somber, reflective quiet. "He's coming back," Leo continued, walking into the room. He didn't come near me. He stayed by the monitors, his eyes fixed on the data. I saw the news about Eris. I didn't know Maya. I knew my father and Arthur Blackwood were involved in something dark, but I didn't know Eris was the one pulling the strings. "It doesn't matter now, Leo," I said, my voice weary. "The truth is out, the debt is paid." "What about Alexander?" Leo asked, finally looking at me. "He gave you everything. He's a man with nothing left but a name that's finally worth something. Do you really think he can handle being the consort to the woman who owns the room?" "He's not a consort," I snapped, the old fire returning. "He's my partner, and he's more of a man than you or Eris could ever hope to be. He didn't give me the company to secure me, Leo. He gave it to me to free me." Leo nodded slowly. "I hope you're right. Because the world is a cold place for a man who used to have everything." He walked out, leaving me in the silence. I looked at the clock. 3:00 a.m. Alexander's plane would be landing soon. I walked to the window, watching the lights of the airport in the distance. My heart was thudding a frantic, expectant rhythm. I had the company, I had the patents, I had the justice. But as I touched the ring on my finger, I realized that I would trade every cent of it for the sound of his voice in the hallway. I wasn't the girl who was locked in anymore. I was the woman who was waiting for her home to return. Alexander POV. The drive from the airport was a blur of silver moonlight and shadow. I didn't have a motorcade this time. I didn't have Marcus. I was driving a rental car, the GPS guiding me toward the clinic on the hill. I felt a strange, jittery energy in my hands. I was nervous. Me, the man who had faced down hostile boards and federal investigators without blinking, was nervous about seeing a woman in a hospital room. I reached the clinic and parked. I walked through the lobby, my boots echoing on the marble. The night porter recognized me and gave a respectful nod, but he didn't rush to open the elevator. I was just another visitor now. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor. The doors opened, and the scent of jasmine hit me instantly. Maya was standing at the end of the hall, silhouetted against the large window. She was wearing a soft cream sweater and dark leggings, her hair pulled back into a loose, messy knot. She looked perfect. She saw me and stopped. For a second, neither of us moved. The fallout of the last 48 hours, the arrests, the resignations, the international scandal, it all felt like background noise. Then she ran. I met her halfway, my arms opening to catch her. She slammed into me with a force that knocked the breath from my lungs. I buried my face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her, the reality of her, the absolute, unshakable truth of her. "You're back," she whispered, her hands gripping the back of my sweater. "I told you I was coming home," I rasped, my voice thick with emotion. I pulled back just enough to look at her. Her eyes were bright with tears, her face flushed with the cold air from the window. I reached out and took her face in my hands, my thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. "I saw Eris," I said. "It's done, Maya, he's never coming back. And the DA has the original partnership files. My father, he really was framed." "I know," she said, reaching up to cover my hands with hers. "We found the truth, Alexander. We really did it." "No," I said, leaning in until our foreheads touched. "You did it. You were the one who saw the slant in the letters. You were the one who didn't give up on the ghost. I was just the man who was too busy trying to own the room to see who was actually in it." I kissed her then, a long, deep, soul-shaking kiss that tasted of the future. The desire was there, as fierce as ever, but it was anchored by something much heavier, something permanent. "Let's go see your father," I whispered. "Maya POV." We walked into the room hand in hand. My father was awake. He was sitting up, his eyes fixed on a small tablet the nurses had given him. He was looking at the old photos of the Sterling lab. When he saw us, he set the tablet down, his hands shaking slightly. "Alexander," my father whispered, his voice a raspy but clear melody. Alexander stepped forward, letting go of my hand. He walked to the side of the bed and did something I never expected to see. He knelt. Not as a gesture of romantic drama, and not as a calculated move for the cameras. He knelt because he was a man who understood the weight of the debt he carried. He took my father's hand in both of his. "Doctor." "Sterling," Alexander said, his voice steady but filled with a raw, unshielded humility. "My name is Alexander Blackwood. My father, Arthur, was a man who let a thief into your house. And I am the man who almost finished what that thief started. I am here to ask for your forgiveness. Not for the company, that is already yours, but for the time I stole from your daughter." The room went silent. I felt the tears streaming down my face, my heart aching with a pride so intense it was almost painful. My father looked at Alexander for a long time. I saw the memories flickering in his eyes, the betrayal, the stroke, the years of darkness. But then he looked at me. He saw the way I was watching Alexander. He saw the man, not the name. Time cannot be returned, my father said, his voice gaining strength. But the future can be built. He squeezed Alexander's hand. Stand up, my father commanded. A partner does not kneel. Alexander stood, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He looked at me, and I saw the final piece of the Titan's armor crumble and fall away. He was free. We were all free. Alexander POV. The weight that had been on my chest since I was 12 years old finally vanished. We stayed with her father for another hour, talking about the science, the clinic, and the transition of the Sterling Trust. I sat in a chair beside Maya, watching her. She was the CEO now. She was the one giving orders to the legal team over her phone. She was the one deciding the next phase of the mapping rollout. And I had never been more attracted to her. She was more than a desire. She was a force of nature. She was the living proof that brilliance could survive the most ruthless of cages. When the nurses came in to settle her father for the night, we walked out onto the clinic's terrace. The Swiss night was freezing, the stars brilliant and distant over the dark lake. Maya leaned against the stone railing, looking out at the city. It feels strange, doesn't it, to have the war be over? The war is over, I said, stepping up behind her and wrapping my arms around her waist. But the work is just beginning. In what work? The work of being us. I turned her in my arms, my hands finding the small of her back. I'm not the boss anymore, Maya. I have no office. I have no board. I'm just a guy with a very expensive ring in his pocket and a lot of free time. Maya smiled, a slow, beautiful expression that made the stars look dull. A guy with a lot of free time, huh? What do you plan to do with it? I plan to be your chief strategist, I said, my voice dropping to a low, seductive rasp. I plan to be the man who ensures no one ever tries to frame a Sterling again. But mostly, I plan to spend every night reminding you that you're the most important thing in my world. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. I hadn't given it back to her since the tarmac. I had wanted the moment to be right. I had wanted the room to be empty. I opened the box. The diamond caught the moonlight, a brilliant, defiant spark of clarity. No more contracts, I said, looking into her eyes. No more locked-in clauses, just a promise. Will you marry me, Maya, for real this time? Maya didn't answer with words. She reached up and pulled my head down, her mouth meeting mine in a kiss that was a final, absolute surrender. It was a kiss that wiped away the gala, the penthouse, the London rain, and the Brooklyn warehouse. Yes, she whispered against my lips. Yes, Alexander, 1,000 times yes. I slid the ring onto her finger. It looked right there. It looked like it belonged to the woman who owned the room. Maya POV. The intimacy that followed was different than anything we had shared before. We went back to the hotel suite, but we didn't rush to the bed. We sat on the sofa, drinking wine, talking about the things we had never dared to say when the contract was between us. We talked about our fears, our dreams, and the kind of world we wanted to build. Alexander was open, raw. He told me about the loneliness of the steward years, the way he had used power as a drug to forget the silence of his life. He told me how much he had hated himself the day he wrote the locked-in clause. I knew you were the one the moment I saw you, he whispered, his head resting in my lap. And I was so terrified of losing you that I tried to buy you. I'm so sorry, Maya. You didn't buy me, I said, stroking his hair. You just provided the environment for me to grow, and look what happened. I created a monster, he teased, looking up at me. No. You created a partner. The desire finally took over, but it was slow, tender, and filled with a reverence that made my skin hum. We moved to the bedroom, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. He touched me as if I were a miracle. He kissed every inch of me, his mouth a map of the devotion he had promised. In the dark of the Zurich night, we were no longer the Blackwood Sterling scandal. We were no longer the Titan and the advisor. We were just two people who had found each other in the fire. As he claimed me, his eyes locked on mine, I saw the truth. He was more than a desire. He was the anchor I hadn't known I needed. He was the man who had burned his world to the ground just to see me stand in the light. And as I cried out his name, I realized that the fallout wasn't a tragedy. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Alexander POV, midnight, Zurich. I stood on the balcony, watching the moon set over the Alps. Maya was asleep. The blank notebook was on the nightstand, its first 15 pages filled with our new history. The world was quiet. My phone buzzed on the railing. A text from Marcus, sir. The SEC has officially cleared the Sterling Trust. Heiress Thorne's assets are being seized. And, sir, there's a message from your mother's legal team. I felt a ghost of the old tension, but I didn't pull away. I was ready. What message? I typed back. She's requesting a private meeting. In Zurich. She says she has one final piece of information. Something about the fourth factor of the mapping algorithm. I looked toward the bedroom. The fallout wasn't over. My mother was still playing the game, but as I looked at the ring on Maya's finger, glowing in the dark, I realized that the game had changed. I wasn't the player anymore. I was the protector. I put the phone in my pocket and walked back into the room. I lay down beside her, pulling her close. The fourth factor. The enemy was striking back. But as the first light of dawn began to touch the mountains, I knew one thing for certain. The woman who owned me was ready for the storm, and I would be right beside her. Maya POV, end of chapter 32. I woke up to the sound of the wind. Alexander was standing by the window, his silhouette dark against the city lights. He looked like the man I had first met, the ruthless, solitary billionaire, but as he turned and saw me, the expression vanished. "You're awake," he said softly. I felt the cold. I sat up, the sheet falling to my waist. "Alexander, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, walking back to the bed. He sat on the edge and took my hand, just thinking about the future, about the truth. "We'll face it together." "Together," he agreed. He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, protective kiss that felt like a goodbye and a hello all at once. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw the shadow. The secret he was still trying to keep. The fallout was coming. And this time, it wasn't just about the past. It was about the fourth factor. I pulled him closer, my heart heavy with the weight of the new world. We were locked in. But the cage was gone. We were the fire, and we were finally burning together. Next chapter, chapter 33, his enemy strikes.